Country. Yes, where? Aha, Czech Republic and Finland. Excellent. And is there anyone here from another planet? Most of us will never get to visit another planet, but today could be the closest that we ever come. We are traveling inside a volcano. A bit more about that in future stops. In the meantime, we'll turn on the AC and zoom over to Steel Bay. I'm looking at Crater Lake. We will begin with the oldest perspective. Native Americans, the descendants of the modern Klamath tribes, have lived in this area probably for over 10,000 years. They were here at the time the lake formed, and they told a story about it. That grand, gray, looming rock formation out ahead of us that rises high above the cliffs there, that's called Lau Rock. It's named for Lau, the spirit whom the Klamaths believe lived in this mountain. I'll tell you a story about him. Long ago, there was no lake here. There was a high mountain. It was called Lau Yaina, for it was the home of Lau, the chief of the below world. Sometimes Lau came up out of his mountain. He towered above the snow-capped peaks. One day from his high perch, Lau looked out to the earth below, and something living, or someone actually, caught his attention. Her eyes were dark and piercing. Her hair was long and black and glossy. Her name was Loha. She was a Klamath maiden. Lau was in love with her. With a voice like thunder, the towering spirit asked the beautiful maiden to marry him. Then she could join him inside the mountain, amidst the smoke and fire, and live forever. But she said no. And then Lau was angry. He stormed atop the mountain, muttering curses and shouting his rage. He swore that he would destroy the people by the curse of fire. Then in the stars above him there was a face, followed by a body. Another titanic figure. This one descended down from the sky and landed atop Mount Shasta. It was Skell, the chief of the above world. The two chiefs began a furious battle. They hurled glowing molten rocks at each other, and burning ash fell from the sky like rain. And Lau opened his mouth and breathed fire. It surged over the mountains and valleys. It incinerated the forest and obliterated all life in its path. The people ran and hid in the cold water of Lake Klamath. They prayed to Skell to save them from the curse of fire. But there was no answer. Then two shamans, old wise medicine men, came forward and said, Skell is allowing our land to be laid waste, because we have not lived as he had wished us to. Now there must be a sacrifice as atonement. Each shaman lit a pine torch. They ascended the mountain, jumped down the vent, and were never seen again. Skell saw that their sacrifice was good. He confronted Lau with strengthened determination, and this time Skell forced Lau back down into his mountain, and the mountain collapsed on top of Lau. The boom was deafening, and the whole earth shook. And when the smoke and ash cleared, Lau's mountain was gone. Where it had been, there was a deep, deep pit. Then soft rain fell in torrents and filled the pit. The violence was over, and peace returned to the landscape. Dive deep into the lake, or swim to Wizard Island and back. And through all the exertion, a vision would come to them, which they believed was a message from the spirit world that would bring them new power. All right, we'll zoom over to the other side of Llao Rock and hear a different perspective on how the lake formed. Almost even with our bow, beginning near the water's edge, you may see some light gray rocks, quite a bit lighter than the rocks around them. Winds and snakes its way up the cliffside, looks a bit like a giant fire hose making its way up there. And that is a volcanic dike. It's remains of where molten magma, hot liquid rock, came up from underground to feed the explosion that formed Llao Rock up there. That was one of several vents that magma traveled through. And are there any geologists on board? Okay. Well, this is a spot that often makes geologists excited. And it also seems a fitting place to talk about the origin of Crater Lake, according to geologists. Long ago, there was no lake here. There was a high mountain. We now call it Mount Mazama. Its peak was 12,000 feet above sea level, or 1 mile above lake level. From lake level to the top of Llao Rock is 1,800 feet. So, if you took that height, and then that height again on top of it, and then the better part of that again on top of it, way up there, that's how high the peak of the mountain was above us.
That's a lot.
Mount Mazama was a volcano. It formed from many hundreds of eruptions over a period of 400,000 years. Clouds of ash and molten lava and blocks of pumice came up from underground and built multiple cones and domes that grew together into a single towering composite volcano, Mount Mazama. At some point in the volcano's history, molten magma began to pool under the volcano, created a magma chamber, sort of a giant lake of molten magma underneath the volcano. Over time, more molten magma came up from underground and filled the magma chamber. And 8,000 years ago, the eruption that formed Llao Rock put a plug on what had been the main vent of the volcano. All right, we have an osprey going by us. It's, well,